Good afternoon, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to our dissemination workshop that explores the investment potential in the blue economy in Thailand. This workshop has been organized by the Asian Development Bank, or the ADB, in collaboration with AWR Lloyd, a leading advisory firm for innovation and sustainability transformation in the Indo-Pacific region. Also, this workshop couldn't have happened without the generous contributions from the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, or the ACGF. My name is Patharapha Pithiyanawat, and together with me, Kun Leena Traicharanwanit, we are from AWR Lloyd. It's our pleasure and honor to be your MCs for this special workshop today.
สวัสดีค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ แขกผู้มีเกียรติและสื่อมวลชนทุกท่านนะคะ ยินดีต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่งานสัมมนาในหัวข้อเศรษฐกิจสีน้ำเงินหรือ Blue Economy ในประเทศไทยค่ะ เพื่อสร้างโอกาสการเจริญเติบโตให้กับธุรกิจและอุตสาหกรรมที่เกี่ยวข้องค่ะ งานในวันนี้นะคะเราได้รับความร่วมมือหลักและการสนับสนุนจาก Asian Development Bank หรือ ADB ค่ะรวมโดยบริษัท AWR Lloyd นะคะซึ่งเป็นบริษัทที่ปรึกษาด้านการวางแผนกลยุทธ์ของธุรกิจและการส่งเสริมธุรกิจอย่างยั่งยืนค่ะอีกทั้งที่ขาดไม่ได้เลยนะคะคือการสนับสนุนจาก ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility หรือ ACGF ในงานวันนี้ค่ะดิฉันลีนาไตรเจริญวานิชตัวแทนจากบริษัท AWR Lloyd จะรับหน้าที่เป็นพิธีกรในการดำเนินงานค่ะ
Our workshop today includes a lot of interesting topics for everyone to explore, such as opportunities for sustainable investment in Thailand's marine and coastal resort sectors, Thailand's blue economy roadmap, and a case study on policy approach to blue economy strategy development in Indonesia.
งานของเราวันนี้ประกอบไปด้วยหลายหัวข้อด้วยกันเลยค่ะตัวอย่างเช่นโอกาสในการลงทุนที่ยั่งยืนในทรัพยากรทางทะเลและชายฝั่งค่ะการกล่าวรายงานถึงแผนพัฒนา Blue Economy ในประเทศไทยค่ะอีกทั้งกรณีศึกษาของกระทรวงแผนพัฒนาแห่งชาติประเทศอินโดนีเซียค่ะในเรื่องการจัดตั้งนโยบายส่งเสริมเรื่อง Blue Economy ค่ะ
We have a very packed day ahead of us, so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Anuj Mehta, Country Director for ADB Thailand Resident Mission on the stage to deliver the opening remarks for the workshop.
เพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลาค่ะทุกท่านขอเรียนเชิญคุณอานุชเมธาผู้อำนวยการสำนักงาน ADB ประเทศไทยขึ้นบนเวทีเพื่อกล่าวเปิดงานสัมมนาในวันนี้ A big round of applause please ladies and gentlemen ขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับคุณอานุชด้วยค่ะ
Hello everyone, I've never had such a rousing welcome in any event, but I'm delighted to be here. A huge welcome to all the guests, many of my colleagues. A special thank you to the government officials over here from Thailand, also from Indonesia, and so many experts from public and private sector. Wonderful to have you all here. You know, just at the outset, whenever we talk about oceans health and the blue economy, there are so many numbers, especially from an Asian perspective. And I always think about this when I start any of these discussions. 600 million, 675 million people in Southeast Asia, heavily focused on coastal tourism, coastal-based livelihoods for their livelihoods. I think 60 million just on the Mekong River Basin. There's a lot of discussion about those 8 million tons of plastic going into the global seas, and 8 of the top 9 rivers being in Asia. There's a lot of discussion about the vulnerabilities of the cities, especially in our region, to the effects of climate change, flooding, and extreme weather events. So the issue of oceans health is so inextricably linked with climate change, and especially for our growing cities and our coastal population in Southeast Asia, that this is a super important topic for us to be focusing on. So, from the perspective of what we're doing and why we're doing this, just at the outset, this is essentially part of a technical assistance project that ADB is funding to develop a better understanding and awareness of the blue economy. What does it especially mean in Thailand? And thanks to a partnership between my colleagues, Susan sitting there who's been leading this, and the AWR Lloyd team who've really done most of the work in also organizing this event today. You know, from ADB's perspective, there's always a question, so what do we mean by blue? And the blue economy, as we define it, is basically a sustainable use of oceans, coastal resources, for basically sustainable economic growth and livelihood development in coastal marine ecosystems. We all know the importance of the ocean's health. We know about the linkages between ocean's health, biodiversity, ecosystems, and I think that's becoming even more obvious when you look at some of the numbers. And I see some of the numbers that are emerging from the report. Market value of coastal marine resources and related industries is 3 to 5 trillion, nearly 5% of the global GDP. That's a huge number. Not that you can always convert all the importance of ocean's health into numbers, but that gives you a yardstick about the importance of the ocean or the blue economy, which is of course massively at threat now. So the number which I mentioned earlier is often used as the signature number, 8 million tons of plastic polluting the oceans. That's a fact. But there are other numbers which are coming. So for example, coral reefs, and there's a big discussion about 90% of coral reefs may be dead by 2052. Fishing stocks, many of the coastal belts that we see are already talking about massively declining stocks. I know one of our projects couldn't move forward because focused on sustainable fishing, except the fish had actually finished. So the stocks are dying very, very fast. This becomes even more important in coastal economies. And certainly for Thailand, I think the reports are basically talking about 3,000 kilometers of coastlines, oceans, activities in Thailand, which as we know span so many different areas. Tourism is the most obvious one, a very important contributor to GDP, but so many other areas, fisheries, ports, shipping, and that's talking Thailand specifically. It is estimated that 1/3 of the Thai GDP is ocean related, and maybe 1/4 of all employment, again showing the importance of the economy to Thailand itself. You know, from ADB's perspective now, sort of stepping back, sort of to the larger picture of ADB, we've made climate change and through that the blue finance or oceans health a very important part of our strategy 2030 going forward, for which we want to increase or enhance our support, both technical assistance, lending, knowledge sharing, all of the different areas where we can, very, very majorly and very urgently into these areas, because we see the linkage between climate change, oceans health, as being super, super intertwined. So I think it's a super important area for ADB, which in itself has positioned itself to be a climate finance bank, focusing on 100 billion financing, which makes this such an important area. I want to say a word of thanks to AWR Lloyd, who've really done the bulk of this work today on producing the report, which is really an industry-wide study on the Thai blue economy sector to understand landscape, interests, the challenges, how can we essentially address these to really drive the financing that's needed for the financing gap, which is something that we talk about a lot. And I think that's why this report, which is going to be soft launched today, the Blue Economy Report, Suggestion for Policy Markets and Private Sector, is such an important report. It's soft launched today. It's coming up, I think, finally in Q2 2023 as a final publication, but it's pretty much there. We've had a number of discussions trying to take some lessons forward on how we convert the findings into roadmaps and projects as we go forward. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are also convening today, which is good lessons, good examples emerging from the report, and we're going to hear about that as we go forward, which should set us on a roadmap to how should we convene public and private, as we have today, stakeholders together, along with the multilats like ourselves, to try and figure out what can we do with the public sector to make the private sector bring in funding, technical assistance, managerial assistance into making the sector efficient, sustainable, and then good for livelihoods as well. Just two initiatives which are worth mentioning from ADB. So in general, we've announced something called the Action Plan for Healthy Oceans and Sustainable Blue Economies. That's committed us to providing, I think, up to 5 billion financing for healthy oceans within 2024. My colleague Gila, sitting there, also heads a specific blue finance hub out of our Jakarta office, which is focused on Southeast Asia. And that focuses itself on saying, knowing the big picture of the issues, how can we help develop capacities and projects on blue finance in Southeast Asia? And he, along with a number of colleagues in Indonesia, are working on things like blue frameworks, potential blue bonds, etc. Maybe last word on financing instruments. Since I'm an ex-banker, I have to talk about financing instruments. There's a lot of discussion about thematic bonds, blue bonds, green bonds, etc. We are still slowly in the region getting used to thematic bonds, and we're still mostly at green. But there is a growing amount of investor interest in blue projects, and therefore coming in through blue bonds. It's a super important way to scale up finance very quickly from the global community, as long as the projects are there, as long as the frameworks are really blue. And I think that's an area where we are putting a lot of support through a technical assistance, which is called the GSS Bonds Initiative, led by my colleague Pok, who's sitting in the front table over there as well. So we are trying to put together many different, I think, pieces of the puzzle, technical capacity, instruments, etc. One of the most important supports that are coming, I think, in this overall circle of support from ADB is the ACGF, the ASEAN Catalytic Green Facility, which has supported this workshop today. The logo is still there on top. And that's headed by my colleague Scott over here. So he's running the ACGF, which is basically an entity supported by all the governments of ASEAN. It's owned by them, actually. And it's, I think, the first green fund in Asia, certainly that I know of, where all the countries are working together to push on this essential agenda of climate finance. So a lot of support available, a lot of entities working together within ADB, all available to take forward some of the lessons and issues which are arising from this report. And hopefully, hopefully many of you all today will raise issues and problems that can be parked at our doorstep to try and help sort out. So please, do raise your concerns and issues. As a last, I want to sort of acknowledge the work done by AWR. I want to acknowledge their excellent effort at putting this together. I'm super excited about the discussions that are going to happen. So super happy to see so many people here today from all the different sectors. I think with that, let me announce the opening of the Blue Economy Workshop and a productive and fruitful discussions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kun Sumana, for sharing insights from the perspective of the public sector, especially on its blue economy-related activities in Trat province.
ขอบพระคุณคุณสุมนาอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะในการนำเสนอเนื้อหาแนวทางและโอกาสในการลงทุนและข้อมูลสำคัญโดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งในจังหวัดตราดค่ะซึ่งถือเป็นอีกหนึ่งจังหวัดหนึ่งเลยที่มีชื่อเสียงในด้านการท่องเที่ยวและก็ความอุดมสมบูรณ์ทางทรัพยากรทางทะเลและชายฝั่งของเราค่ะ
Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Ramadan Putera Drafi, Associate Director from AWR Loy on the stage to present the findings on Thailand's Blue Economy Roadmap.
ลำดับต่อไปค่ะจะเป็นการกล่าวถึงรายงานแผนพัฒนา Blue Economy ในประเทศไทยค่ะโดยมิสเตอร์รอมฎอนพูเทราดราฟีรองผู้อำนวยการจากบริษัท AWR Loy ขอเสียงปรบมือด้วยค่ะ
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeffrey, but for short, people usually call me DJ, so it's easier to remember. I'm Associate Director at Edinburgh Lloyd. I'm usually based in Jakarta, Indonesia, but today I'm very happy to meet everyone here in Bangkok for this workshop. A bit of introduction about my firm. So my firm, Edinburgh Lloyd, is an independent advisory firm. that offers bespoke strategy consulting, equity advisory, and project advisory and venturing services. We have been operating in the region for more than 23 years now, with headquarters in Bangkok and offices in Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh City, Mumbai, and consultants located across the globe. In the past 5 months or so, Deloitte has been working together with ADB to perform a market study and develop a roadmap to scale financing towards Thai blue economy sectors. So we have done a deep dive on the 10 blue economy sectors according to ADB taxonomy. We have engaged in insightful discussions with various stakeholders in the sectors. You know who you are. Some actually are in this audience. Thank you very much for your support. And we have also come to understand the barriers and thought of possible solutions to address them. And today, I would like to share our key findings to everyone in the audience. But before that, I think it is worthwhile to be on the same page about the blue economy, and where else to start but on the status quo. We cannot afford to be complacent about the status quo, which has been reliant on fossil fuels, resource exploitation, and centralized power, because if we do, we will keep moving towards a worsening future caused by climate change. Then comes the concept of green economy a while back. So the green economy has 3 key principles to sustainable development. The first one is low carbon, second one is resource efficient, and third one is socially inclusive. For better or worse, in the more recent years, this has become a necessity rather than a progressive thinking. But all in all, we need to continue champion this for a more sustainable development. And then, even more recently, we have started to hear about blue economy. During our discussions with different stakeholders in the past 5 months or so, often the first thing that they asked was, how is it different than the blue economy? And then it's usually followed by, we hope that it does not complicate things. The good news is that it will not. The blue economy share the same principles with the green economy. So it's also low carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive, but focusing on the world's oceans, water bodies, and marine ecosystems. Then the follow-up question is this: why do we need a blue label then? Why do we need to give a visibility to ocean-related projects within the wider green market? The short answer is because it is important, which means showing the blue economy here as a small bubble is actually inaccurate. So I'm going to enlarge it a bit, because while it is only a subset of a wider green market, it could affect the economy quite significantly. As an illustration, this is our Earth, a replica of our Earth, and as we know, it's commonly called the blue planet. As the Earth rotates, we can clearly see that the color blue actually dominates our Earth. This is because, obviously, around 78% of our Earth's surface is blue. And if we look at the global blue economy as a country, it is equivalent to being the 7th largest economy. The ocean itself is also nature's own carbon capture and storage system. It absorbs 30% of the CO2 in the atmosphere. And SDG 14, which is life below water, put an emphasis on the importance of ocean's health as well as the ocean economy. So truly there is no life without water, and unless we put a halt on the unabated use of the ocean's resources, it will no longer be able to sustain human activity. Knowing this, we believe that mainstreaming the blue economy is the key to a greener future. In the context of Thailand, the blue economy is even more especially important. Thailand has more than 3,200 kilometers of coastline and 23 coastal provinces, including, for example, Rayong, Chonburi, Phuket, and of course, Strat, as Kun Sumana just mentioned. And while this is, for example, relatively small in size compared to Indonesia, for example, the ocean economy contribution to GDP is actually relatively the same as Indonesia at around 30%. That shows how important the blue economy is for Thailand. And as we can see on the slide, in Thai financial ecosystem, this implicit chains of influence serve as a great bedrock upon which to develop the blue economy and financing towards it. But it is also important to acknowledge that there are a lot of stakeholders, as you can see in the slide here, both international and local, as well as even more plans involved in this process, especially at secondary and tertiary levels. This shows that there is a good level of interconnectivity between stakeholders, and if done right, if everything is working together towards the same goal, every initiative, every program, every movement has an impact echoing across this ecosystem. So the time is now. It's a fruitful time to be increasing private participation as well as capital flow to the blue economy sectors in Thailand. And hence, to scale financing towards blue economy, Deloitte has performed a three-step exercise to develop a blue economy roadmap for Thailand. As the first step, we will start by looking at the sector inherent attractiveness. Then we'll also assess the degree of interest from Thai financial institutions towards these sectors. And finally, combining our analysis, we will create a 2x2 prioritization matrix and group the different blue economy sectors into 4 buckets. We will now discuss the steps one by one. So we start by assessing the inherent attractiveness of the blue economy sectors. But before we get to that, I will also answer 2 important questions in this section. The first one is, what are the blue economy sectors based on ADB taxonomy? The second one is, what are the 5 parameters that we use to assess attractiveness? Once we have answered these 2 questions, I will show at the end of the section the result of this step, which is the relative ranking of the blue economy sectors. So let's get right to it. To have a clear scope for our research in the past 5 months, we stick to ADB taxonomy, which divide the blue economy into 3 focus areas. The first one is sustainable coastal development. The second one is pollution control. And the third one is ecosystem and natural resource management. Within these 3 focus areas, there are 10 more specific sectors. So within the sustainable coastal development focus area, there is coastal resilience, there is coastal and marine tourism, there's ports and shipping, as well as marine renewable energy. Under the pollution control focus area, as the name suggests, there are 3 sectors. First one is solid waste and solid waste management and circular economy. Then there is a non-point source pollution management, as well as wastewater management. And finally, in the ecosystem and natural resource management, there are 3 sectors. The first one is ecosystem management and restoration, and sustainable fisheries, as well as sustainable aquaculture. Here are just a few examples on blue projects in Thailand. I'd like to give give a more tangible illustration. I would like to highlight one project from each focus area. So in the sustainable coastal development focus area and within the coastal marine tourism sector, for example, here we show the pilot project developed by Banpunex, which is the microgrid system that is able to generate, store, and supply 100% clean energy for 24 hours a day at Mali Resort in Ko Lipe, Satun Province. And then from the second focus area, I would like to highlight from wastewater management sector, there is a Bangkok Waterway cleanup investment, which is a rehabilitation project for the Khong Sansep Canal. And the budget will come 81% from the cabinet, and the rest will go from private investment and PPP scheme. And finally, another example on sustainable aquaculture is the crab bank model, which is formed by the Thai Crab Product Group in collaboration with different stakeholders such as the government, universities, NGOs, and industry. So now that we already on the same page, hopefully, on the 3 focus areas and the 10 blue economy sectors, Now it's the time to assess these sectors, and later also in this section we will rank them through these 5 key parameters. First one is current market size, second one is growth potential, and then we also look at environmental impact and social impact, and finally regulatory incentives. Then the underlying factors for each parameters, including, for example, for market size, is GDP contribution and fiscal budget and government spending. For the growth potential, we did a market sizing estimate looking at different key drivers, including, for example, innovation and development potential. For environmental impact, we look at how the sector has potential greenhouse gas emission reduction as well as impact on biodiversity. For social impact, we look at the impact of the sector to community and livelihood and employment and well-being. And finally, for regulatory incentives, we look at both existing and potential national policies and incentives. And now, why don't I share you our assessment through this heat map? So we put the 10 blue economy sectors on the left here, and then here is the result looking in a heat map. A darker shade of red basically means that the sector ranked relatively higher than the other sectors for a specific parameter. So for example, if we go on the regulatory incentives column on the last one, we can see that solid waste management and circular economy, as well as wastewater management sectors, rank highly in terms of regulatory incentives, which is aligned with Thailand's BCG economy policy in the more recent years. We do the same approach for each parameter, for each column, ranking the sectors, again, relatively to each other. And this heat map is the result. To make more sense about the heat map, we rank the blue economy sectors from the most attractive to the least attractive. So on top, we have solid waste management and circular economy and wastewater management, while at the bottom we can see sectors that today, at least today, still have a very limited commercial pathways especially for private participation in the sector. So one last thing I think that I want to reiterate from this section and this heat map is that this is a relative ranking. So all blue economy sectors are important, obviously, but since we only have so much time and so much resources, we need to strategize and prioritize. Ranking the sectors is our approach to do that, but I cannot stress enough that all blue economy sectors are obviously important. Moving on to the second step of our journey, we now map Thai financial institutions' interests in those sectors. Similar to the previous section, we will answer first 2 questions. The first one is which financial institution are within our scope and why. And the second one is what are the 3 stages of interest of these financial institutions. And again, once we have answered these questions, at the end of the section, we'll see the result, which is the mapping of Thai financial institutions' interests in the blue economy sectors. So let's get right to it. First, to define our scope, commercial banks and specialized financial institutions are the 2 dominant financial institutions by asset size in Thai financial system. While there are only 29 commercial banks and 6 specialized financial institutions, combined they represent around 2/3 of total assets in the industry. The rest are shared by more than 5,600 financial institutions ranging from saving cooperatives to mutual funds. In addition to that, the ultimate beneficiaries of commercial banks and specialized financial institutions are also the most comprehensive and most relevant in blue economic context. Hence, in our research and in this presentation, we put a lot of emphasis on commercial banks and specialized financial institutions. Next is the degree of financial institutions' interest itself. It could be divided into 3 stages: holding portfolio, meaning that the financial institutions already extend loans, for example, to the specific sector, even if it's relatively small. The medium stage is considering to invest, which means that the financial institutions has extended loans to similar and or adjacent sector, or maybe in other countries, or have non-lending projects in the sector. And the third stage, which is the earliest one, is no interest, where we have confirmed that there is no interest yet or no reliable publicly available information. So during our research, we assess the portfolio of the financial institutions based on self-published reports, analyst reports, desktop research, and direct interviews. And we look, as our scope of assessment, look into blue economy lending, the sustainable and green lending, adjacent sector lending, loan profile, and also non-lending projects to determine, again, the interest of these financial institutions in blue economy sectors. In the next couple of slides, similar to like the first section, I would like to share to you a couple of case studies about various sustainable financing and blue financing initiatives by Thai commercial banks. The first case study that I want to highlight is from TTB, which we would applaud as progressive in terms of responsible lending products. On the funding side, TTB has raised more than $250 million from both green and blue bonds in the past 5 years. In turn, this has enabled TTB to extend green, blue, and sustainability loans to companies and projects that are aligned with their green and blue bond framework. As you can see on the right, examples of use of proceeds include not only the more well-known areas such as renewable energy and clean transportation, but also blue sectors focus such as wastewater, aquaculture and fisheries, and coastal and tourism. The second example or case study is coming from Krungsri, which has been active in issuing sustainability-linked loans or SLLs to its clients. So Krungsri inaugurated SLLs in 2021 as a financing product for corporates, tying interest rates to specific KPIs and sustainability targets and performance, rather than the traditional particular use of proceeds. Krungsri is not the only bank that issue SLL, obviously, but we believe it is quite among the most active. Some examples including SLL for Thai Union as well as SCG packaging. Now, the moment of truth. So after screening all 29 commercial banks and 6 specialized financial institutions, here is a heat map showing the different degrees of interest from big banks, medium banks, small banks, as well as specialized financial institutions. Like before, so we put the 10 blue economy sectors now already ranked by attractiveness, relative attractiveness, from the previous section, and here is the roadmap. Similar as before, darker the shades of red, meaning that the sector has been gaining more attention from a specific types of financial institution. The key takeaway of this heat map is this. The financial institutions have been largely putting their attention to the sectors that have a high interest in inherent attractiveness. So the sectors that's on the top of the table has gained more darker shades of red, which is great because this means that there's no mismatch in perception. However, as we move to the next and final section of my presentation, and we move the sectors into the 4 quadrants in the prioritization matrix, we'll see that there's some slight mismatch. So without further ado, let's move on to the final section, where we put it all together in a 2x2 prioritization matrix. And in this final section, we will see the 4 different quadrants in the matrix and which quadrant that each blue economy sector fall into. Then we will also take a look at the overview of key barriers and potential solutions in the blue economy in Thailand, as well as looking at the specific barriers and specific solutions for each sector in each quadrant. So let's bring this home. To create a 2x2 matrix. As you remember, let's put our previous sector attractiveness assessment on the y-axis and put the financial institutions' interests on the x-axis. This will result, of course, in 4 quadrants. The top right quadrants, we call it the quick wins. The second quadrant on the top left, we call it the hidden gems. The quadrant on the bottom right, we call it stepping stones, and the quadrant on the bottom left, we call it question marks. Now, to put the sectors into place, in the first quadrant, we have solid waste management and circular economy, wastewater management, sustainable fisheries, and sustainable aquaculture. In the second quadrant, the hidden gems quadrant, we have coastal and marine tourism sector. In the stepping stones quadrant, we have 2 sectors, which is the ports and shipping and marine renewable energy. And finally, in the question marks quadrant or bucket, we have coastal resilience and ecosystem management and restoration. We shall now look at how this positioning means for the kinds of barriers as well as potential solutions that these sectors are facing. But before we get to that, we also need to be on the same page. And I would like to take a step back and go over first about the definition of the 7 main barriers that we have identified in the Thai blue economy sector. As mentioned before, the different sectors in different quadrants will have slightly different barriers that they're facing, but it is important to define first so we are all on the same page. So the 7 main barriers, including 1, lack of awareness of strategic importance of the blue economy sectors. Then we also have identified that there is lack of a sustainability integration into core business activities, both in the lending and the borrowing side. Third one, we have identified that there is a lack of monitoring and standard tools, which leads to increased perceived risk due to uncertainties and difficulties in monitoring. And then we also saw that there is a lack of investment readiness for some sectors. And then number 5, we see that there's a lack of at-scale projects, again, for some sectors. There's also the SME-related barriers that includes, for example, lack of collateral and credit history. And finally, on a more long-term basis, we see that there's also climate risk that could increase the perceived risk of projects and limits the investable universe of projects. As we'll see in a bit, the barriers on the left, which is number 1 to number 3, tend to be more generic and far-reaching, faced by almost all sectors, albeit at the different degrees. While the barriers on the right, number 4 until number 7, tend to be more sector-specific. After talking about the barriers, we shall also talk about the solutions, or potential solutions. We divide the solutions under 2 big umbrellas. The first one is optimal product designs, and the second one is optimal regulations and incentives. Talking about product design ideas, there are 6 optimal product design ideas that are implementable in the short term, which may require active collaboration between traditional FIs, financial institutions, and catalytic capital providers. To reiterate, different sectors, different quadrants will have different challenges and hence also different ways or different solutions to implement. But it is important to define them first so we are on the same page. So the 6 optimal product design ideas, including SLL, which we have been discussed a bit in the previous section, sustainability-linked loans financing, which is more flexible in their use of proceeds and can support projects at a small scale. Then we think de-risking with a guarantee component, especially for final ultimate clients that lack collateral and credit history, also has merit. Similarly, de-risking with the technical assistance component is especially important for projects that lack investment readiness, and this can provide support to facilitate anything from the preparation, financing, and execution of the projects. Number 4, blue carbon finance is especially important for projects that doesn't yet have an established commercial business model. Then community-based revolving loan funds would make small loans more scalable and cost-effective, more at scale. And finally, we also think that de-risking with an insurance component would directly address the climate risk barrier that we talked before. On the optimal regulations and incentives recommendation, there are 4 recommendations to create an enabling underlying environment to increase private participation and capital flow towards Thai blue economy sectors. The first one is to develop a practical national taxonomy, so we can create a common language and increase awareness of the strategic importance of the blue economy. Second one is to create and nurture a better data environment, not only on a more established data points like the ones we've seen in, for example, TCFD and GRI, but also blue-specific data points and metrics. Third one is to promote private participation through financial incentives. For example, anything from feed-in tariff for marine renewable energy, tax holidays, tax exemptions, as well as import duty waiver. And finally, to integrate public sector efforts to make sure that there's support from competent agencies to scale projects established by the private sectors. Now we will deep dive a bit on each of the quadrant that we have previously shown. First, we take a look at quadrant 1, the quick wins. This is the ones on the top right. So it means that it ranks relatively high in terms of attractiveness, as well as has been getting enough attention from financial institutions. The common denominator here is that there has been financing activities towards all these 4 sectors. The difference is that for pollution control sectors, the ones on the left, while there are financing strategies that already specifically target the sectors, they tend to be still quite small. Meanwhile, for sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, it's actually the opposite. They have been driven by few big issuers rather than specific and more targeted financing strategies. Hence, the solution for pollution control sectors is really to encourage more financing through a better product design, because there is clearly a strong underlying interest that is already there organically. So, for example, if the projects is there's lack of at-scale projects, then using an SLL financing could help solve that. Meanwhile, the focus for sustainable fisheries and sustainable aquaculture is to instead scale up what's been happening. It is to use leverage to leverage the proof of concept to scale down for adoption by smaller issuers, as well as by the SMEs that dominate these sectors. So, for example, when we talk about SME-related barriers and lack of at-scale projects, one of the product design ideas is the community-based revolving loan. Talking about community-based revolving loan, I'd like to highlight one project, which is the LPM UKP from Indonesia. It is a revolving loan fund for SMEs in the marine and fisheries sector, facilitated by the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. And this program has several key features and strategies that to properly provide financial access to these SMEs. So, for example, the first one is end-to-end assistance from field officers, starting from loan proposal to repayment, as well as post-registration, thus allowing high repayment rate and low NPL rate. And then there's also not only collaboration within the Ministry of Marine Fisheries, but also with other government agencies such as ICCTF and Bappenas, which Pagel win after this. And during the workshop, I think we can directly ask him. And then the third one is there's also beneficiary trainings and proof of credibility, which helps not only with giving some guarantee to creditors, but also incorporate sustainable principles. And finally, it is also quite robust that it has two different types of tariffs catering to different market class. In Indonesia, there's conventional financing as well as Sharia financing. This program alleviated the obstacles such as high NPL, getting market sizing for fishing industry, and collateralized loans. Moving on to the second quadrant, the hidden gems, the one on the top left, which means that the sectors rank quite high, relatively high in terms of attractiveness, but somehow doesn't get enough attention for financial institutions. There's only one sector in this quadrant, which is coastal and marine tourism. I think in the previous speech by Nuj, as well as by Kun Sumana, has been mentioned that coastal and marine tourism is very important for Thailand especially. And based on our analysis, the barriers include lack of at-scale projects, SME-related barriers, and climate risk. And hence, the suitable product design ideas, clear certification standards, and practical national taxonomy could hopefully address these barriers. One example that I'd like to showcase here is from Santara Hotels and Resorts, which is the first Asian hospitality group to incorporate all the GSTC industry criteria. And it has also adopted the GST recognized Greenfield portal to track and benchmark performance. And this kind of a better data environment will help creditors to give a better information about their lending, but also helps the companies on incorporating different sustainable principles in their operation. Then on the third quadrant, the stepping stones, these are the sectors on the bottom right corner, meaning that it ranked low, relatively again, ranked low in terms of attractiveness, but has somehow been getting attention from financial institutions. Looking at the two sectors in this quadrant, the rationale is clear. It is because financing strategies towards activities within the ports and shipping sector, as well as renewable energy in general, is quite common already. So that's why there is already enough attention to the sectors. However, these strategies rarely specifically target ports and shipping as a sector. So usually it's just activities within ports and shipping, but not exactly looking ports and shipping as a sector, or specifically also on marine renewable energy. So renewable energy funding is quite common already, but specifically on marine renewable energy, it's still not targeted enough. So the focus for this quadrant is really to encourage financial institutions to have more targeted financing strategies, and this could be done, for example, by improved data environment, which is why I want to highlight the initiatives called Ocean Disclosure Initiatives, which is a science-based framework and methodology currently in development to support businesses in all sectors to address and strategize efforts towards ocean-related issues. Having a better data environment for these sectors, including, for example, more R&D, more research on tidal wave, for example, for marine renewable energy, will reduce perceived risk from the investors, and hopefully will bring more capital flow towards these sectors. Finally, on the last quadrant, the question marks bucket, it's the one on the bottom left, meaning that it ranks relatively low in terms of attractiveness, as well as on FI interest. Are the question marks are these two sectors, so the ecosystem management, restoration, and coastal resilience. The common theme for these sectors is that their current non-commercial nature makes them relatively attractive because there is no proven commercial model and revenue streams. Hence, the key theme really for this sector should be to unlock their commercial value through innovative product designs. For example, blue carbon finance. And then obviously, if there's a new innovative product design, then an improved data environment is also important to improve commercial potential and certainty about the sectors. One of the encouraging development in Thailand, including the FTIX, which is a carbon credit platform, comprises about 12,000 private companies across 45 sectors. And key players, for example, including Bangchak, Kasikorn Bank, BTS, and CP Group. And also another initiative is around using mangrove for carbon credits. To conclude my presentation, I would like to bring back this matrix from before. So considering the inherent attractiveness of the sectors and the financial institution interests of the blue economy sectors, we have grouped the 10 sectors into 4 different quadrants. In our collective and collaborative approach, effort to increase private participation and capital flow towards blue economy sectors in Thailand, I sincerely hope this presentation has inspired you to plan for your next steps. Mainstreaming the blue economy, again, is a key to the greener future, and it's not going to be easy, but nothing worth having comes easy. My name is DJ, and this is the end of my presentation. Khop kap.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaffe, for thoughtful recommendations on how we may increase investment in the blue economy in Thailand.
ขอบพระคุณดีเจอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะในการกล่าวอภิปรายข้อเท็จจริงข้อมูลสำคัญต่างๆสำหรับ Blue Economy ในประเทศไทยค่ะอีกทั้งยังยกตัวอย่างโปรเจกต์ที่สำคัญหลายโปรเจกต์เลยอย่างเช่นระบบ Microgrid System นะคะ